So hi everyone. Can you hear me? And if you have your microphone, we might want to all unmute our microphones now just so that we can introduce ourselves. I'm Lori Starr. I'm fairly new to the TOPS team in Washington, D.C. I've been with Tango International for about 10 years, mostly leading evaluations. So this is a new role for me. I'm really excited about it, and I have taken over the task force. Edith is heavily involved in M&E for TOPS, but I'll be leading the task force. We've sort of split the duties of the M&E lead here at TOPS. So I'd just like to hear from you, who's in the room and your length of involvement in the M&E task force. And I don't know, Marcel or Jose or Diana. Oh, Diana's microphone is not working either. Okay. Marcel's in Nepal. Okay, good to meet you. Mercy Corps, Nepal. Okay. Well, Tango, we've been working a lot with you, Marcel, haven't we? Hi, Christy. Welcome. We'll take a few more minutes. It looks like people are getting their microphones set up still, so I'll stop here and we'll run through the slides a few more times and make sure we can get things set up.
And if anyone tries to activate their mics and is having a difficult time doing it, I have provided the conference line information, so you would be able to just call in and listen in that way. So.
Christy, I don't know if you've got your microphone set up, but we were doing some introductions, and I just wanted to hear, I introduced myself, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about you and all of you and how long you've been involved with the M&E Task Force. I know it's been some time since we've convened. Okay. Can you handle the questions on that? Yeah, okay. And thanks for your patience. I think it always seems to be a little challenging with Adobe Connect when to get everybody on the same page.
Huh. I don't know why that's happening. Sorry everyone, I'm not sure why that would not be happening for you, because when I do it, that's what comes up. Let me... Okay, so the problem is when you see step 3, why don't you try just dialing in using the phone line, and let's see what happens then.
They won't be able to use the microphone. But
on there, but sometimes we do it like that. So like, yeah. So would everyone like to try it that way? Or you can alternatively just call in using a phone to the task force, and we have the phone line set up for you. So.
Okay, it seems to be here's where we're stuck. Is anybody able to speak? Christy, are you able to speak?
Hello, who just joined us?
Morning.
Morning.
Diana?
Are we Christy on the line?
Oh, hi, Christy. Great. Thanks for joining via phone.
Christy, just really quickly, you're calling in via the phone line, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh, my computer's been having problems, so it could be mine.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. Well, in the essence of time, I think I'll go ahead and I'll keep cycling through these slides. It seems like we're stuck on step 3, so this is not my area of expertise. we'll go ahead and we'll manage with the chat box if we can. As I understand, the key focus of this M&E task force is to collaborate and come to consensus on the best ways to improve the effectiveness of M&E in the programs that we manage, our food security nutrition programs. So the two areas that we're going to talk about today that you voted on, this is where the most interest was indicated. They may be difficult to build consensus around. This is how do we link theory of change to our M&E systems, and what are the implications for M&E in refine and implement. They may be difficult to build consensus around because their use in Food for Peace funded programs is pretty new. But because they're new, I think that there is a lot of potential for us to share our concerns and share any epiphanies that we've had as we've gone through this process in our separate organizations. I think there's a lot of potential for the task force to discuss questions that remain, and I'm sure there are many of them, and identify where there's an opportunity to fill some gaps in guidance so that others don't have to stumble through those same questions. So did you all receive the agenda I sent out very late yesterday? I think you probably did. We're going to just start off the morning with about 25, 30 minutes talking about best practices in linking the project theory of change to M&E systems. The first thing I'd like to know is how many of you have gone through the process of creating a theory of change for at least one Food for Peace application or another food security program. But we're specifically focused on Food for Peace because that's a lot, that's who's really demanding it right now. But Jose and Christy, I know World Vision has. In fact, I'll be using some World Vision slides as an example. Here's your slides from Bangladesh. Okay. And Diana's led workshops on theory of change. Jose, happy. I'm really, hi Hap. Good to see you. Hap just joined us in person. We've got most everybody else online. Thanks for coming in person. We're just talking about how many folks have actually gone through the process of creating a theory of change for a Food for Peace application. Oh. So not in a Tango workshop, not in another workshop, but really having to go through the process and the approval steps. So have you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, okay, Hap has, Christy has, Jose? Marcel? Yeah, the one in Nepal, that's right. Okay.
Jose, are you on the line?
Yeah, he's typing, I think.
I think he almost read it.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yes.
Hey, working.
Oh, nice. Great. Yeah. Nice to have voices. Okay, well, how many of you believe that your project theory of change is well linked to your M&E system? On through this process, I'm familiar with the Mercy Corps one in Nepal. I know, definitely know about World Vision's theories of change. Okay.
I think it's a good project design kind of a method, but insofar as how it's linked to the M&E system is, I don't know that it improves much. The indicators are really the bridge. The indicators that fall out of only a few of the indicators that go in the IPTT are in the theory. So I wouldn't say it's real well linked.
Okay, so that was Hap from CRS. And Diana's, okay, not involved in any project. Okay, great. Well, Diana, it'd be great to get your insight, just sort of the overview of what you've seen from other institutions and how well, as we kind of go through trying to define some best practices in linking and exactly what needs to be linked. If you could provide that insight. You've seen a lot of organizations, a lot of projects. That'd be really helpful, and particularly as you critique, train and critique on theory of change, it would be great input.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I coming through? Oh, okay, great. I do have one comment, if now is a good time.
Sure.
Okay. One thing that I think a big disconnect that has happened thus far, at least in the Food for Peace context, has been that, and not to blame Food for Peace, because this whole concept of linking theory of change and M&E to project implementation is in its infancy. But one of the issues has been that projects are asked to submit their proposals. In fact, that's happening as we speak for the next round. They're asked to flesh out a full project proposal and a kind of a short theory of change. And then after they're awarded, they convene for Food for Peace workshops that are also co-assisted by Fanta. And we map out, like we dissect and reconstruct their theories of change. And of course, I think there's a recognition that that's a completely backwards way to do things, that ideally you would do some kind of, formative research before you even build your project implementation and theory of change. And I think what's positive about this upcoming Refine and Implement process is that it's going to accord projects the ability to do things in the right sequence, where they can actually build their theories of change as they go and build up project implementation in response to their theory of change, and not the other way around. So does that resonate with people?
Well, it certainly resonates with me, as I've gone through a number of design workshops with, helping groups construct the theory of change. But I do think the Refine and Implement the first year there will offer a great opportunity. The thing is that, and Dina has been very clear about the fact that when you turn in your applications, you still need a sound theory of change. So it can't just be a sort of a wiggly, poorly defined concept. They do want to see a sound theory of change when that application goes in. So it doesn't, we need to be very clear that this doesn't get us off the hook. We still need to do a lot of that research beforehand so that we can present a theory of change, and then a lot of the testing and a lot of the questions that come up when you're trying to make those causal linkages and you realize, I don't have evidence for that, I don't know. Those are the kind of questions I think that can be answered in your year one of Refine and Implement. But
the evidence can be answered in year one?
Well, hopefully more of those, some of the evidence. The questions you have when you really get down to those lower level outcomes and you're trying to understand what, what's spinning the gears here. What are and I always work from a problem tree. I know it didn't come out strongly in the new technical chapters that's necessary, but I really don't know how you can do a theory of change without a problem tree, because as you find out other issues, you've got to insert them in that mirror image, that conjoined twin. They go hand in hand. But other folks experience, Jose and Marcel, Christy, I think you piped up and I ran right over you. Did what Diana say resonate with you as far as looking at Refine and Implement as an opportunity?
Yes, this is Christy from World Vision. I do agree with what Diana was saying. I went through the process in Bangladesh with our recent award, and the thing is, the people that put together our proposals are completely a different team than those that are running the project, so it was helpful to redo the whole thing and look at it after the award as well, just because those are the people in that room were those that were going to be moving the project forward. And then I kept having, because I had worked on proposals before this requirement came into place, like we always kind of had our theory of change, but it wasn't ever laid out as specifically and critically as it is now. So there was always trying to fit, when we were putting the project together, trying to fit that that framework into the theory of change, and then just really trying to separate that was a good exercise at the most recent M&E workshop, because as a designer, I wanted to make sure that that theory of change looked very similar to our framework so that our M&E system would match up. But that's not necessarily what they were wanting us to do in that exercise.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess I've had maybe a biased view of how NGOs go about creating their theories of change, because I've participated in a lot of workshops to design these, but the folks implementing the project have always been involved. So maybe that's outside the norm. I mean, I think that right there is something that we need to push for. They certainly will be involved in the Refine and Implement Year 1, but if they're not involved in those design workshops and in the creation, or if they're not at least involved in vetting the theory of change, we're all asking for a lot of repetition and you know, taking several steps backwards. Is it
for CRS? We're
yeah,
like robots.
I agree.
We're the people who exactly like Christy said. That's how it works for CRS. We try we'll try more and more to get people who are at least potential COPs involved in that process, but we don't. Typically, the team, it's like Christy described, and so we've had to set up things to actually transition projects, even without a theory of change, even in other kinds of projects, where in the beginning, one of the first steps is to bring the team that is going to work on the project through and look at the design and say, now, what does this all mean? Why is it designed like this, and refining it.
okay? All right. Well, let's kind of move on. Diana's made a note about best practices, and I do want to move on to that topic as we think about linking the project theory of change. First off, let's just define what do we think needs to be linked. I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you. Diana's mentioned indicators. I mean, that is, and Hap, you mentioned that as well. I mean, that is certainly, it has to be linked. Not all of the, I mean, every step of the theory of change should have an indicator. Not all of them are going to end up in your IPTT. Those that perhaps are the responsibility of other actors will not end up in your IPTT. So indicators are definitely one area that needs to be linked. What else?
The assumptions.
The assumptions, absolutely. So well, we'll go back to how do we link these, because I'm seeing more assumptions pop up in theories of change. That's something Food for Peace is requesting. I know early Tango guidance, we had you creating sort of a matrix where you could provide a lot of detail. You know, the belief was that it doesn't all fit in a conceptual model. We now know we've got to put some of those assumptions right in the conceptual model, but I'm wondering how well those assumptions are linked to your M&E system. And maybe you can comment on that. I mean, are you checking on the progress of the assumptions? You know, those assumptions are so critical, but I wonder if after we drop them into our model, what's the process for checking throughout the project that they still hold? Because that's a gap I definitely see.
The problem. Right. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Hap.
It's a problem we're having right now with CRS that, first of all, the definition of assumptions have kind of changed over time. Now, I think it's wonderful to talk about contextual assumptions and factors, and then this word rationale, which I really don't understand. I must say, the rationale assumptions. I'm assuming that means internal hypotheses to the project. If you're going to say A leads to B, then you're making some assumptions about what has to happen for A to lead to B. But our teams aren't understanding it that way. So first of all, there's confusion around what's a rationale, outcome, route, and what's the contextual one. And then also, what do you need to be checking? That, which I think you're talking about, Laurie, that really is still missing. That, you know, the first hurdle is identifying them, or understanding them. Then the second is identifying them. And we haven't gotten to the point yet of saying, okay, so if we've identified what assumptions we're making, how do we check whether those assumptions are coming true or not?
Okay.
Then the next step would be where to put those indicators for the assumptions if they were identified.
Right, and those will not be in your IPTT.
No.
Those will just be an internal process of monitoring. I'm wondering, Lauren, can we flip back and forth between these areas? If we get a model of a theory of change, is there any way I can have the flip chart and the PowerPoint playing at the same time?
We can do that.
That would be helpful. So let's just look at a model.
Diana had a comment, though, just in case.
Different types of assumptions. Okay, yeah. I think I agree, there is a lot of confusion about the different types of assumptions. One thing, and actually I can highlight some of this. This is what the info I have from, oops, I'm trying to move things on my screen and I'm not.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. Can I make the slides go forward? Okay. So,
That's interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. That's okay. So, folks, if you want to see the slides, the theory of change slides that I'm putting up on the screen, if you want them to be larger, there's 4 arrows right above the button that says stop sharing, and you can make a full screen.
They don't
have that. Okay, well, this might be a bit useful.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Oh, you do?
I can blow it up to full. I just followed your instruction and it blew up very nicely.
Because you won't be able to see it otherwise. It'll just be too small, and it may be too small anyway. But this is from World Vision. This is a theory of change that was accepted by Food for Peace. So I'll clarify a bit, and then I don't want to get off track, but this does give us some information about maybe some shorter capacity development sessions just to get clarity on some of these areas. So, Food for Peace has been very clear. Again, this is for their theory of change model. So you may find guidance out there. A lot of the guidance referenced in the technical chapters and the M&E guidance and policy, it references other theory of change materials that may or may not agree with this definition. But Food for Peace has been very clear that they are not looking for assumptions such as, we've got an assumption here between men and women are willing to, oh God, I'm so sorry, I can't even see this.
To take investment risk.
So we've got the top 2 pink boxes. We've got increased diversification of livelihoods, increased production of safe, diverse, nutritious, and high-value foods. Okay, in the middle, it used to be that we could put an assumption in here, something that was out of our control. Men and women are willing to take an investment risk. It's surely out of our control. In my mind, that is an assumption. And I think a lot of the previous Tango trainings, encouraged people to put assumptions like this in there. No longer. So they want things that are, because their premise now is that that if you are trying to, if your project is trying to change people's attitudes, behavioral change about investment risk, then that is something under your control. So they're really looking for things out of control, the broader things that we used to put in our proposals many years ago: conflict, the potential for conflict, the potential for price spikes. The examples I've seen are very large. If you live in a area with a 100-year flood, but your project's going to be there in the window. In a 10-year window, you might expect flooding. If you live if you're working in an area where you're seeing flooding every 3 years, that's not an assumption. That's that's a risk to program for. So I think without getting too far down the rabbit hole, you're highlighting that that this might be a good area to just have a smaller meeting to convene and clarify what assumptions and rationale. This is an area we need more guidance.
So just so you know,
Yeah.
Jose, Diana wants to know if we will be sharing the slides.
I can share the slides with you, Diana, and everyone. These are from the Knowledge and Sharing meeting in January, so there may be a lot more in there that we don't talk about today, but I'm happy to share the slides. You have a suggestion for another best practice?
Yeah, sorry, it's above the one on data collection systems. Like it's 4 or 5 comments above.
Yeah.
Okay.
That it's important to have at least one indicator at every level, a node of the theory of change to help track progress and ultimately see impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. With the
No, that
indicators
one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I meant one below that. That was my first one. There is one below that on data collection systems.
Oh, okay.
Another issue needs to be well thought out is data collection systems. They need to be different for different purposes. Absolutely. The beneficiary-based surveys, and these all help to vet our theory of change, right? So let me just try to data collection, okay, differing. Do you want to say a little bit more on that, Diana?
Well, yeah, I guess just the thought is, I don't think one size fits all. For instance, so it may very well be that, say you've got hundreds of thousands of beneficiaries on the ag side, and you decide you want to do a beneficiary-based survey because routine monitoring really would be onerous to collect complex indicators like gross margins, etc. So maybe for your ag purpose, and not even all the indicators that you're tracking on the ag side would a beneficiary-based system be worthwhile. But then, say on the MCHN side, it may well be that although, and on the MCHN side, you may very well have a slightly different set of beneficiaries, so the same survey isn't going to serve your purpose in terms of data collection. But also it may very well be that the indicators you're trying to collect to support the MCHN purpose can easily be collected through routine monitoring or by going to health clinics like health centers to collect data on well, that may be hard to do, but just the thought is that I don't think one data collection system serves the purpose of all purposes because A, the beneficiary pool might be quite different, and B, the data, the indicators you're trying to collect data on may be best suited to be collected through one system versus another.
Yes, I absolutely. How many folks attended the FANTA webinar last week on sampling for beneficiary-based systems? That was, well, I've posted the links to those materials on the M&E Task Force website, and I'll send out a link to that again as well, because the webinar was great. There was great information about when to use what type of survey, as well as a sampling guide. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep, Marcel was on that call. Marcel, you mentioned you went back to, you referenced the technical chapters, which I agree with. I don't know if folks have read the technical chapters. There's a thick, I don't know, it's 18 pages or so on theory of change, and it does give a lot more. It's here, Hap, if you want to take a look at it, but it does give a lot more information on how Food for Peace is differentiating between rationale and assumptions. I think in-person sessions would still be great, and webinars where people can ask questions. I mean, do you think that's useful for your field staff? Would that be something useful, a short webinar on, the guidance is there, right? But we know that published guidance sometimes isn't enough on rationale and assumptions. We're going back to a comment of Marcel's. Yeah, Hap's shaking his head. Christy?
Yes, I think that would be great.
Okay, okay. Bye, Diana. Thank you. Yeah, and so Diana had to leave. We are, just for everyone, we're going to continue this conversation at a task force meeting after everyone gets through sweating through the DFAP applications, but I think it's good for a small group to sit down and get some ideas about where to take the conversation. So again, back to linking, we have all kinds of I think, and Diana's point about different data collection systems, there's so much data you have to collect to, one, build your theory of change for the application, right? And then after, there's all that list. We'll go through the refine and implement. There's all kinds of different data that needs to be collected for refine and implement. That data is what is revising your theory of change. And I'm not sure if I understood, Happy, your comment earlier about you don't really see how I didn't know if you're saying you don't really see the potential for linking theory of change to M&E systems, or that CRS isn't linking it right now.
I see the potential. I think CRS is linking them as good as it can.
Oh, okay, okay. You said something about indicators, like you thought, well beyond the indicators, we're not doing much.
Well, the theory of change is linked to the log frame. And so the log frame tells you what indicators you really got to have there. And Food for Peace says there's a limitation on what indicators need to go in there. So, fine, they're in there, but by and large, they're the standard required indicators, one way or another, we have to address.
Right.
Because they're either at the subpurpose or IO level. And they also say, I think somebody quoted it, not more than one indicator per result. They are in the line of the log frame. So that's what goes in the proposal. And insofar as the theory of change is presented, and we have to work on it, those other indicators come later on. They come later on. So what we're going through for proposal process, now this is different from the refined implementation. I think refined implementation will join those things because there's a lot more time to do evidence, to look at what do we need, and even to get indicators for the assumptions, to identify the assumptions we're making, and then indicators to follow them. So that as you flesh out those through that first year, you not only know what you have to find evidence for that's already lacking into a study, but you also know what indicators then you have to measure those things.
Right.
So the theory of change, as you have to apply it in a proposal, is, and if indicators of that linkage, there aren't many indicators that need to be in the proposal, and they're high-level indicators. So most of them come out of the third-party, the macro baseline data gathering. A lot of them do it anyway, the population-based surveys. So there's potential for linking, but I don't think the system, if you're using theory of change in a proposal, lets you take all that potential, gives you enough time to develop it.
Okay.
TD, for instance, is mentioned, and I think this is important. If you're looking at the causal relationships between two things, then, and this has been a problem for us, the evidence requirement. We've talked now about the assumptions requirement that are new for this current round.
Right.
But there's also, and I think rightfully so, a big emphasis on evidence. And we're really conscious of that. But we're still stuck with the construct that we have, that somebody described. Proposals are prepared by people who aren't necessarily technically knowledgeable and going to be involved in the project. So that means whatever prior studies you have to do, assessments you have to do, they have to be, you need time to do those before the proposal is written in order to gather the evidence that you have to put in the proposal that says, here's the evidence for a plausible assumption that X will lead to Y.
Well, absolutely. And I don't, you know, maybe that's a best practice. Again, I may have been, my experience has been with organizations and several times World Vision, so I don't think, Christy, that it's absolute. I mean, I've been on a number of, on your proposals where I've been helping with assessments to inform a proposal for months before that RFA is going in. So I think if we talk about best practice, that's a huge piece of best practice, is you have to invest in that kind of formative research that goes into building the theory of change. I think what you said is very relevant. Marcel's agreeing. I agree with TD. Marcel also, theory of change tends to increase the number of indicators in addition to the huge amount of food for peace indicators. Anybody want to comment on that? No? Is there agreement on that?
Can we, I have a question.
Sure. And Jose, aren't you speaking? Aren't you online? I thought Jose had called in. Yeah, Christy, go ahead, and then we'll sort out Jose's ability to speak here.
I'm just wondering if someone could flesh out more about having those extra indicators, because we didn't really find that in this last. In my experience, I haven't found that. A lot of our programs are very similar to what Food for Peace. You know, we're looking at what they're wanting, and maybe we're looking at it differently. But when are you finding extra indicators, or where are you finding them?
Marcel, can you comment?
Sure can.
I would agree that the theory of change identifies more clearly where you need indicators. And I do think it will depend on, Marcel has talked about, and Christy, you mentioned maybe for you it didn't come up, but it's definitely going to depend on what shakes out in your theory of change. Sometimes the CSIs are very accurate, and you may not find that there are contextual differences from the CSIs in the specific regions you're targeting. But I really think whether or not more indicators come out of that theory of change depends on your model. I think there is a potential for more indicators to come out, and I think depending on what you want to monitor, if you want to monitor risk, a lot of things that will not go into your IPTT, there is a potential for more indicators, but that's not an absolute. Marcel's got, if there's, okay, if you're, okay, so resilience, there are no standard food for peace indicators, but you still need to measure food for peace indicators that may not be applicable to your program. Well, I know certainly in Nepal you're experiencing that with no MCHN component yet, so many MCHN indicators there. Nepal will be a very interesting case because in my mind it's a very, I don't know if you're familiar of the PAHAL program that Mercy Corps is doing in Nepal, but to me it's a really great example of this theory of change thinking about bringing in other actors. And we've got the Save the Children Sahara project doing all of the health, a completely different project, where Mercy Corps is working on the ag and the resilience, yet Mercy Corps is measuring the health indicators, although they're not responsible for any, but it's that they've got to build in health, but they're not implementing anything related to MCHN. And correct me if I'm wrong, Marcel. At any rate, so I'm making a list of topics that it seems like maybe we can break this down and at future task force meetings really dig into the way forward and what we can do to provide more guidance on it. Let's think of this as sort of the trip through Europe where you hit 10 countries and you decide where do you want to go back and visit. So back to what needs to be linked. Any other comments? And Jose, I'm sorry I missed a comment from you, but if you can speak up rather than type, I think you were on the phone. That will help the conversation progress. You said linking evidence gaps in the theory of change to M&E systems. Excellent.
TD. He calls himself TD.
Oh, TD. Okay, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, TD. Now I get it. Linking evidence gaps. Are you on the phone, TD? This, I think, has huge potential for you folks, because when you've got to put a sound theory of change forward in your application. We know from experience, even when we spend a couple months on theories of change, we still have evidence gaps. So those are the kind of questions, and as we shift into refine and implement, this is absolutely where the theory of change can help you identify what does your M&E system need to cover, whether it's through qualitative research process, interviews, as adding, something to a short annual survey, something like that. But this is a huge opportunity for linking the two models. Something no one's mentioned, and I do want to move on to the refine and implement topic, is stakeholder analyses. Do any of you still do these? These were like really big in the 90s, and are folks still conducting thorough stakeholder analyses?
Well, there's the word thorough. I'm afraid your definition of thorough might be, we do stakeholder analyses. And
okay.
we do that. But whether they zero in on the assumptions that need to be made, the evidence gaps that there are, you spend, 2 months on a stakeholder assessment. Now you're up to 1 month before the proposal's due. If you haven't covered in just that stakeholder analysis some of the issues that need to be fleshed out even further, then what to do?
Right. How about other comments on the extent to which your staff time and resources allow you to conduct thorough stakeholder analyses?
Yeah, this is Christy from World Vision. We do them in the pre-positioning stage, and then again once we start designing the program. And then we do another exercise at the startup workshop. So when I go in and do M&E workshops with the team, we'll sit down and we actually have a form that looks just like this, and I'll have them start going groups and start putting it together so that they're familiar, to make sure that we're adding in those stakeholders in the critical points of our M&E system as well, to make sure that we're collecting data.
Okay. Others? TD?
TD seems to think similarly to HAP, and so does Marcel. So, DRS conducting.
Oh, is it going? I'm not seeing it. Oh, okay.
TD.
Sorry. Okay, got it.
So we do stakeholder analysis before and during design, and then once the project is awarded, we do a more thorough stakeholder analysis for the M&E system. So it's who do we need to be involved in
Okay.
that? I think TD's referring to that particular part of the linking to the M&E systems.
Okay, but then it's got to be linked to the theory of change, and this is one area that I think it's been difficult. I think we need more guidance. I think this is a big gap in guidance. I just sat with a REEF at a meeting a couple weeks ago where none of the theories of change that Food for Peace has been receiving are bringing in those other actors, those actors that again, you want to show the big picture in your model, okay? You don't have to take that, I'm going to go back to the World Vision slide, where they've got and again, apologies, it's not big enough, but here you've got other actors that are responsible for doing things. The government, health worker turnover remains stable. Government actors enforce early marriage laws. You can see the blue circles are indicating the actions of other actors. Those have to be in your theories of change models. So it has to, if you're doing your stakeholder analysis as part of your M&E system, bring that information into your model, because that's what's missing now. Now, you notice that whenever we see these blue circles here, the other actors, it drops. We don't have to trace down the work of other actors. We don't have to follow the causal logic, but you do have to account for it, and those are some of the main points to bring up in your narrative. When you've got a shape or something that indicates somebody else is doing something, and it's really critical to the achievement of one of my outcomes, it becomes, in our model, it's going to become an assumption, right? A different type of assumption. We're assuming that they will do their job. If it's Food for Peace, or Feed the Future, we're assuming that the markets are going to be, the market value change will be developed and so forth. So this, I think, is a huge gap where we need more guidance, is how do we get these other actors into our theory of change? Usually you're already doing the work. If you're saying you're doing stakeholder analysis, you must have that information. So take that information, feed it into your theory of change, and then we've got to follow up on it, because when Food for Peace asks you to revise your model, you've got to know who's still doing what. Are there any new players on the block? Maybe there's a new, government safety net, or maybe there are some projects that have faded out. So it's during the design phase, but then it's also a yearly check-in or a biannual check-in. It's 10:30. Okay. Is there anything else? We didn't quite get as far as I wanted to here, but I think, is there anything else we want to add to this list? I think we have a good foundation for the next task force meeting, where we could look at the things that need to be linked and then talk about how are we going to link them. What kind of guidance do we need to link these, and the constraints and enablers, sometimes staff time, budget, what's getting in the way of linking these things. Is there anything else people want to add to the list? I'm sorry, I've got to remember to check in here. That formative research, right? The ongoing, the community consultations, right? Your ongoing monitoring needs to come back. You need to see how that feeds in to your theory of change. So we've created a theory of change. That theory of change is front and center through the whole project. But how often do we go back and look at it and say, I've just been getting a lot of questions about, well, when do we refine it? How do we refine it? And my theory is there's not much to this. You're doing everything you've already done, but it's just taking that information and bringing it back to that graphic and seeing, did anything change?
But no, if you've identified what things need to be done by other actors, and you've said other actors, you've identified that Mercy Corps and his project is going to do such and such a thing, then the next step is creating indicators and bringing those indicators into your system. The number of indicators increase. So now you've got to think of how are we going to track whether Mercy Corps has actually achieved those results that we're assigning to them that are necessary for our theory of change. So now you've got additional indicators, and you're gathering information on those indicators. Then you have to track those indicators, and if over a year, so it isn't just kind of gathering the data, it's looking, I'm saying the obvious, it's looking at that information to see whether, in fact, in this example, the other actor that we've talked about are doing the things that we're assuming they were going to do that are going to feed into our project and not kill it.
Right.
So then there's some aspect. Track it. What do you do? If they're not doing now what they were supposed to be doing, you've identified that, and that's another piece of work. You have to refine your theory of change in some way or another to say this isn't being picked up on. So at some point we've been told that this should be an annual process, and I agree with that. I think that a conscious annual process of revising the theory of change according to what the data are telling you about the assumptions, the evidence that you thought was accurate but isn't happening, is important. I mean, it's purposeful. It's not, it doesn't kind of fall out of an M&E system.
Absolutely. No, and if you're doing that already, then great. But I mean, I think that is a best practice, is that taking the data, coming back to the theory of change, and seeing what, if somebody's not doing what they said they were doing, another actor, pull it out and see, does your model crumble? Hopefully not, if you have a strong model, or what else needs to be in place. There's some examples on the slides I'll share that, like with Mercy Corps, right? We've got this is not Mercy Corps' theory of change, but you have a theory of change, and then you've got something like what happened here? You've got an earthquake, right? You've got an earthquake coming into a project. That's going to shift everything. You've got to go back to your problem tree and put in everything that happens, all of the tentacles that feed off of that earthquake, and see how they're going to touch each aspect of the project. Or in another case, maybe we've got here, this says targeted government input subsidies. Something's changed in your government policy. Well, before, in your problem model, right, you can't see this, I'm so sorry, but this says, in this theory of change, this was inadequate access to farm inputs. Right? Well, if suddenly we've got targeted input subsidies, your model's going to change. So these are the kind of, when Food for Peace is talking about review your theory of change, see if it still holds, it's coming from all the data in your M&E system. It's reviewing, it's reflecting, it's like what still holds, what have we learned? It doesn't necessarily mean you've got to have a whole set of extra indicators, but it does mean you're checking in.
Marcel and TD had two comments.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Marcel.
And
TD's got
dip, was Marcel's comment as something.
More data analysis to test TOC causation. Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah. Great.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I can just add one point here. So far, we have been just doing testing whether we met the targets or not, whether it's annually or by the end of the project. But that is not sufficient now to test the logic in the theory of change. You need more data analysis to test the causation, which is not done so far in the current DFAB program.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying let's analyze the data. That's our job, right? But
But
not
so far
not just capture the data, not just have these static points.
He says complemented.
Yeah, so far that was not the requirement, because the requirement in the annual result report, you just test against the annual target, whether you met or not met, that's enough. But now in the annual report or in the subsequent interim report, you have to basically test the logic from one level, whether the one level to the next level just happened or not. For those kind of testing, you require more statistical analysis with supplementation with qualitative research.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, it is testing. It's definitely testing at every level. There was some slides back here we didn't get to, but it's looking at, how do you help your staff, your program staff, not just your M&E staff, but you have some kind of system where you know that you're progressing up the ladder. If this is achieved, our causal logic says the next step should be achieved. And this is not a very complicated theory of change here. It usually should have things feeding in from all directions. But if you get to this point and everything's in place and you've achieved everything below the next level, but you're still not reaching that indicator, you've got to reflect on your hypotheses. What's missing? You go out and do some more, barrier analysis, or figure out why things aren't shifting as you planned. Marcel, I'm not sure. I think you're agreeing with TD, and then I'm not sure if there is a point, Marcel, but if there is, go ahead and make it, other than agreement. I apologize if I can't, I'm not tracing the conversation here.
Is linking to the dip.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, the sequencing. The sequencing of when you do, this is a great point, Marcel. The sequencing of when you're going to implement certain activities, it's something I think that theory of change really highlights is what do we do first? So often we have people starting up at the very top of the logic model and trying to take on actions that our logic shows us we need to start at the bottom. Our logic shows us the sequencing of events, so it can be an excellent tool to help you write your dip. I guess I can leave it to the group here. Do we want to?
Can I
Yeah, please.
bring up something, because you
Please.
just said something actually that leads into
Yeah.
what a problem I've been having.
Sure.
That back again to the proposal stage, the theory of design, the theory of change, and the log frame. As I'm understanding the instructions now, and this is, I preface this because I may be wrong, we are supposed to talk about the purpose level, what happens there, the sub-purpose level, what happens there, the intermediate outcomes, what happens there. And by what happens there, I mean, what are we assuming about it, what evidence do we have, and then what data do we have, da-da-da-da. Then you go to the output level. I'm finding in a lot of results, in a lot of theories of change, that there's a big distance between a sub-purpose and the I.O., and particularly the I.O. to the output, particularly right there. Huge logical difference. There was a time when theory of change allowed us to do something, add another layer called something like immediate outcome or outcome. Mm-hmm. You had a slide up here that said lower, there was one there that said lower level outcome.
Yeah, that's the Food for Peace example.
Yeah, it was. And I'm that one. The one back. There it is.
Yeah.
Lower level outcome. That, if we can include a lower level outcome, it lets those steps, those logical steps from one stage to another, be a little bit closer, easier to define.
Include it where?
In the theory of change and in our log frame.
Well, what's restricting you?
Everything says just those three things: purpose, sub-purpose, I/O, output. And it says inputs don't have to be in the log frame, but those are the four categories, the four levels that are generally talked about.
Okay.
I went through all of
So there's some guidance. So there's where we can clarify the guidance.
Absolutely.
Because I know that's not what Food for Peace wants. They want detail, and they want to see the entire causal logic. So there's a great point for how can we help to clarify the guidance and get more information out there. Inputs, no. But that first, the bottom layer of the output level, and an output, that means it could be an activity. It's like, what is the grease that you are going to shoot into, you're going to add to this system to start all these gears turning?
But what happens, I'm interrupting, but what happens is people tend to raise those outputs to something like that are quasi-outcomes, because there's just not, because there's so much distance between the intermediate outcome that they're supposed to be achieving, that it's like our people designing these theories of change are trying to reach up over this big distance and making outcomes out of outputs. They're labeling these things outputs, but they're really outcomes, because the thinking is, well, you have to do.
Okay.
And so if we weren't afraid that adding a layer of outcomes will somehow prejudice us, which is my concern, if we can do that, if there are no restrictions against that, that will let us give more detail to the theory of change, to the log frame, to the indicators, and particularly the logical steps between one level and another.
Okay. As I understand what you're presenting to me now, there are no restrictions. And the guidance right now is for that first level page that shows the entire the entire theory of change, some of those things may have to be cut out.
Right.
But every single purpose needs to have its own page, and that's where you really dig down into detail. And the other place, if you can't show, if space-wise or whatever, you can't get a piece of that you want into the graphic model, the narrative is the place to do that. Make sure that that point is brought up in your theory of change narrative. Anything where, well, so maybe that's something we need to lobby for. Maybe we can lobby for more, it's one page? Does everybody understand? Is that, and I apologize if I'm off here, theory of change narrative is one page? I'll have to go back to the guidance. Is that everybody's understanding? No.
It's
okay.
not. No.
Let's review that, because that's never been my understanding, and I've edited narratives that are, 5, 8, 10 pages. So
Okay.
let's verify that. I'm not sure.
Let's say empirical evidence shows me out of 2 or 3 proposals that people are interpreting as one page. To keep the distance down, what I'm seeing is one page, and literally one page.
Okay. So that's something we can clarify. Okay, what are the expectations on the theory of change narrative and how
let me add one point here. This is we are talking about the theory of change summary in the technical section. That may be one page, but the theory of change narrative, that means the logic and evidence, it normally can go pages and pages.
So this will be good. Here's a gap in guidance. We want to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's make sure that we can, get this information out so that everybody understands they have room to share everything they couldn't fit into their graphic. I do know your narratives are not supposed to just run through. Your narratives are not supposed to say anything that's obvious by your graphic model. It's just filling in the blanks. Like if the reader, the user of your model, you think they may have trouble understanding a causal link, you should add more detail in your narrative. You need to discuss why you're making these assumptions, on what basis are you making the assumptions, what's convincing you these different stakeholders are doing what they've said they're going to do. So anyway, so there some more guidance on what goes into the narrative would be good. I'm wondering, it's 10:35. Do we want to continue the discussion on theory of change, or would you like to sort of touch base on the M&E implications of refine and implement? I know we didn't get as far as we wanted to, and I think I had lofty goals as far as how much we could discuss on theory of change. I do think we have a good foundation for the next meeting about how to think about what needs to be in place and some specific ways that the M&E task force could contribute to documenting and disseminating best practices in linking. So put it to a vote now. Do we want to are we on a roll here? Do we want to keep talking about theory of change, or would you like to touch on refine and implement a little bit? Okay, TD's going to R&I. Christy? HAP?
I can go either way.
Okay.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So my first question to you is, and I'm going back to the stakeholder consultation that was held on refine and implement. The slides here are from that consultation and really just lay out what was in the annex of the last RFA. So they're just for reference. I'm not running through these slides, but they may be helpful for us if we need to remember what are we being asked to do in refine and implement. But my question to you is, what are your perceptions? Do you view R&I as asking for all kinds of extra assessments? And if so, are there any really? Do you view this new model of refine and implement as requiring a lot of extra work or assessment on the part of the M&E team?
Well, I think we're doing this already. So I don't know if it's extra work. Like everything on this slide, we're currently doing for Bangladesh within the startup period.
Okay, Marcel, TD, help?
Well, I'll admit to thinking that there is a lot of analysis that has to go in. That's mainly what that year is about. That notwithstanding what World Vision's been able to do in terms of assessing,
Okay.
there are a lot of things that still need to be, I think, studied, and the evidence gathered for the links and for the linkages that may mean a change in the theory of change. I went to that, Tim's first theory of change presentation, and everything that he said was theory of change is based on knowledge, is understanding studies and research and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And in his model, he talked about like 3 years of work, literally, I think, of studies that has to be done before you go about designing a project where you think you've got the design, all the bases in the design covered. And so I will admit to thinking that refine and implement that year is a year to do more study.
It is, indeed.
But you've just said, do we really need extra? I heard World Vision say we don't need, it's extra work, we've done these assessments, and that you've said it's not enough. Have we done enough by the time the proposal's been submitted that we don't need to do more during that first year?
Okay, and maybe I wasn't speaking clearly. My question was, do you view what they're asking you to do in the next year as anything different than what you already do?
But it is different. We're going to be doing it hand in hand with Food for Peace, first of all. We're going to be doing it over a year. And the final design of the project, the understanding of how it's going to work is going to be the result of that at the end of that year.
Mm-hmm.
So you're at Food for Peace and I'm CRS. We got a year now to go down the low and say, what more do we need to know about this? Oh, well, we've got this assumption. Well, we thought World Vision was going to do this, but do we really know that? So there is analysis that needs to be done, and it's conscious, it's purposeful, and it's paid for, which is another thing. I mean,
Well, I see that as a huge benefit.
It is a benefit.
Okay.
I don't see it as extra work. I see it as necessary, absolutely a great thing, being paid for, giving us time.
Great. Okay. I see it that way too. Maybe I'm just not communicating in a way that I'm not getting my ideas across. I just needed to understand there was a lot of kickback from the stakeholder consultation notes where it seemed that people were freaking out, feeling that this refine and implement was adding a lot of work to the program, where I see it as this is stuff you already do, you should be doing at any point, and should be pretty much standard practice. And now you've got someone to help you and pay for it. And you've got an extra year to refine it where you don't have to worry about, but I am not running a program and I don't want to come in with blinders and be missing something. So I just wanted to hear from you guys what,
I think it's a fabulous opportunity.
Okay. So we've got, TD, go ahead.
I want to add just one point here. The point is clearly said, this we are already doing, but may not be doing in a structured way prior to submission of the proposal, because all this requires a lot of time and money. And we don't have that money FOP giving prior to the proposal. So I'm fine with doing this analysis paid by FOP to refine the design. Because we will not
Okay,
be doing
but
all these things.
you feel uncomfortable doing, okay. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead, TD.
No, to me, it is a good approach that we have sufficient time to do all this research after the award. Because prior to the award, you may not have sufficient time and you may not have the budget to do all the things. So I'm fine with this.
Okay, but it doesn't relieve, okay, getting back to where you've got to have a solid theory of change. It doesn't relieve you from doing a lot of this prior to your application. You still need to do a lot of this research, and I think that there's where my concern is. I feel that sometimes people are interpreting it as, okay, now we don't have to do any of this before we turn in an application. But most of the PVOs did this kind of research in order to inform their proposal, and then did more of it afterward. So it doesn't alleviate the need to do it before you design a program and submit an application, which I know is a budget constraint, but I think that's part of the game. As far as the gender analysis, though, and the value chain analysis, the IEE, all of those things that you had to do anyway, it's a big relief. I mean, maybe we can just take these point by point and think about how refine and implement would change our current processes, if at all, and if there are concerns or opportunities. If you look at, so what you're being asked to do is review and refine geographic targeting at the community level. Okay, how is refine and implement going to change what you currently do? Right? Do you currently review and refine your geographic targeting in a traditional program? Yes.
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 A bullet number 1. You currently do this. So how will R&I change our current process, if at all? And what are the concerns you have, and what might be opportunities? Or no change?
No major change, but there could be some minor change in terms of how you phase in and layer different activities into geographical targets.
Okay, how you phase in and layer?
Yeah, of different intervention, different intervention technical areas.
Anybody else? Okay, any constraints you see to this ask of refine and implement? Or any opportunities? Okay, how about bullet number 3, your community consultations and your validation of assumptions? In best case scenario, you've already done some of this to develop your theory of change or to come up with your program design. How many of you have time to do this in the first year in traditional programs before you start implementing, to sit down and talk about needs and priorities and, their ability to recover from shocks and stressors?
Well,
have you had time to do this? Yeah, Christy.
We're doing that right now as we're going through the exercise of beneficiary registration, and we're going into communities and sitting down with them as we're identifying households to participate, but also just discussing the needs and the priorities in those communities.
Okay, so this is something that World Vision typically already does in the first year?
I think so. I mean, it's happening right now in a couple of our programs, so if it hasn't been done in the past, it's being done.
Yeah, okay. And Marcel, TD, HAP?
Yes, we do. We do in the year one of the implementation of the project, but may not be so strong in validation of assumptions.
Say that again, TD?
What I mean to say that we are doing this community consultation to identify the interventions and needs and interventions in the community, but not as strong as validating our assumptions currently.
I didn't understand the last part either. I understand that you're already doing it. I'm sorry, it just wasn't clear on this end. You're already doing it.
Yes, now we are doing the community consultation to identify the need and the interventions required in the community. We are doing it now.
Yes, we're doing it now.
What is more important here is that even if we identify the needs are different, we may not be refining our assumptions. But this,
Okay, you're refining it.
Yeah, so this is an opportunity to refine the assumptions and the theory of change.
Okay, got it. Got it. I heartily agree with you. Anybody else? Marcel? I think the question here, oh, go ahead.
Marcel just typed in. It really depends on the amount of time you've been able to spend on assessment before or during the proposal stage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're typing along.
So is R&I going to change our current processes regarding community consultations and validation of assumptions? Are there concerns? Are there opportunities here?
No concern. This opportunity is this is enabling us to refine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Marcel, maybe you want to expand on that. It sometimes changes with certain negotiations with Food for Peace.
But yeah, of course you negotiate, but you have sufficient data to go for negotiation.
Okay. Right, which could, you may not have had a chance to do those community consultations prior to, if I mean, once you refine your targeting, it's maybe the first time you've talked to certain communities. So opportunity seems to be the consensus here, Christy?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
It's huge. I mean, to give you an example, in Guatemala, to air our dirty laundry, we, in the first DPAP of Guatemala, it came out that we should have had some water sanitation, a wash element to that. It was never in the RFA, wasn't proposed, and Food for Peace didn't ask for it to be added during negotiation. But at some point in the first year and a half, somebody said, hey, we're missing a wash component here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that first year lets you do. It lets you do I think TD hit it perfectly. There's some research that costs some money to test this hypothesis. We said in our proposal that A is going to lead to B. We've got evidence at the large level that A should lead to B. But what are the in this particular case, with these particular people, in this particular project, we need to do, he used the term, qualitative research to see,
absolutely,
does this work? Now, qualitative research is not something that my organization, that's wrong. We do actually fund those kinds of studies. But many organizations may not, and we don't have time for those. And I think the point that Food for Peace during negotiations may change that theory of change enough that you need that first year to go do some other studies.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful opportunity. I'm not seeing anything wrong with it at all. And I'm hoping that USAID picks up on this model
How do others feel?
Marcel said that he had the exact same problem in one of his projects, and
Right, where something was identified after the, similar to the wash example. So, okay, well, we don't have to go through these. I mean, we can use this time as you best see. We've just got a few minutes left today, but I'm hearing from this small group, you only see it as an opportunity. Are there any concerns?
I talk a lot.
Good. It's nice to hear someone talking beside me.
I've been struck by that we're going to do this together. Now I've heard this from mouths of Food for Peace, and I don't mean to say this. I think it's good that we're going to do this year together. I think it's great. But one thing that concerns me is that if, as we're going down this road, we kind of disagree about something between Food for Peace and CRS or the implementer, there will be some. If Food for Peace thinks we ought to be going in this direction, then we ought to be sure that we're going in that direction. That, as in Spanish, they say el que manda. Food for Peace is the one that says, we think you ought to have a wash component, have a wash component. So, that we really have to go hand in hand. With
How engaged? What does level of engagement mean?
Yeah.
This increased level of engagement? Is that the question?
Yeah, and good faith. That we all want to get to the same place. And if standing on my idea that wash is necessary, just to use this example, whereas my implementer is showing me evidence that says it's really not necessary, why waste time with that? I mean, we want to get to the same place. If Food for Peace says stand on your head, I come from consulting where it's easier. If the client says stand on your head, you stand on your head. So that engagement ought to be close, it ought to be timely, and it ought to be in good faith. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's the piece that's missing. You get down the road and you say, well, why didn't you plan this thing? Why didn't you recognize this impact, this constraint? Well, we didn't have time, whatever it might be. This gives us that time. So that at the end of it, you're Food for Peace and I'm CRS, we say, let's shake hands. We agree on this theory of change. Now we're ready to start.
It definitely, I mean, my perception is it's a huge commitment on the part of Food for Peace to say we are in this together.
Absolutely.
We care. I mean, I'm not an implementer, and so I may have just a different lens on, but I see it as a huge opportunity to move forward, working together. I don't. Folks online, do you have comments, or Christy?
Marcellus.
Is there any constraints or that we need to talk about here, or maybe in the next meeting? I do want to wrap it up at 11.
Marcella's typing. So, here we go.
Okay, practice in the synergies, always something we all like and talk about, but in the field it's not always that easy. And Food for Peace can either function as a catalyst or a stumble block. Okay, so again, we're getting down to relationships, and what are those relationships? And we do know they differ. I mean, you have different AOR personalities, you have different personalities at the mission. So I think just we'll talk about how we can foment that working relationship that we want, so that it's a little more, I don't know if predictable is the right word, but so we have the type of situation Hap described. Are there any other comments? I'm going to wrap this up. It's almost 11 o'clock, and I do want to let you know about one new effort of the TOPS M&E team. But if there's anything more from TD or Christy?
Nothing.
Okay.
No.
Okay, great.
No, not me.
Super. Well, I want to let you know that I am starting some short capacity development sessions. They may be a webinar, they may be in person. I hope that a lot of them for headquarters folks are in person, but this is an opportunity to drill down on very specific weak spots or areas that need some help. rather than a 5-day training. So or a 3-day training. I hope that there's something that people can make time for because they're short. They are convenient. We'll do them at several times a day so that, in person here in DC, also maybe an early morning session for those of you in other countries. But they would be to focus on, like how do you calculate the CSI correctly? What questions should be, standards in your qualitative research? Just areas that people continue to struggle with despite published guidance. So right now the source of sort of the areas that I should be focusing on will be food for peace. But I'd love it if you guys could contribute, if you know where field teams struggle or where M&E teams struggle, where it's just not clear. There's a need for specific guidance. Some of the issues that came up earlier, like what's the difference between assumptions and rationales. I'm talking laser-focused mini sessions where we just discuss one point and we try not to bring in a whole lot of concepts. Maybe, what has to be included in your TOR, your theory of change narrative, things like that. So I'll reach out some more, but I just want to let you know that that's happening. I hope that we'll be kicking off these mini sessions / webinars toward the end of the summer. I'm not sure what the first topic will be, but it may be that I need to call on you, some of you too, for your expertise. If there's something you're really, your agency is really good at, you can bring your technical knowledge to the table for these mini trainings. So
we used to do, this work task force used to put on, I think it was once a year, field trainings.
Okay.
And the field were the audience, the participants, people in the field.
Great.
I don't think we've done that for the last couple of years, but is that something
that sounds
still fun?
Great. I would like to see this task force was really a thriving body of a few years ago, and I think that there's so much technical skill out there and within the task force that it would really be nice to see how to pull that technical skill together and share it and get it out there and actually do some tasks, darn it. Get some tasks done. No, but I mean, just the opportunity for all these agencies to come together and throw all your knowledge in the pool is amazing. I mean, the TOPS is such a nice mechanism for that. Yep. So that'll be something to bring up at the next meeting. Again, I'm going to try to schedule it shortly after. It won't be a month from now because I want to bring folks up to speed that couldn't attend because of the DFAP, so it probably will be in like 3 weeks. But I really appreciate those of you who joined today. I know it's been a long time, and it's been great to have your guidance, your wisdom, your input today. TD, you're saying, yeah, we need to meet periodically. What do you mean by periodically? More often, or what's ideal for you?
In the talks, earlier we used to meet at least, I remember, once in 3 months, but for last 1 year, I didn't see any meeting, the task force meeting, like this.
There were few and far between.
I think the last one was June 22nd of 2015. So I would think we need to meet once a month. And acknowledging that everybody's not going to make it every time. I don't want to put I know you all have very busy lives, but I would like to get something regular set up so we don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out when we can meet. I'll just say, hey, here's the time. I want it to be convenient for you, but here's the time. We'll know that maybe it's always the last Thursday of the month, or we figure out a time that we can plan on, and then whoever can show up shows up. But at least we're keeping the conversation going, and through with Lauren, all of these are recorded, and I'll type up notes, so if you weren't there, you can at least see what was going on. But, are you guys, or TD, Marcel, Christy, are you available to meet once a month? Is that something that interests you? Would you like to, see this task force
Everybody's ready.
come up with, yeah, okay. Okay,
Yeah, I think it was really helpful in the last few years when it was every month, just to know, just to bounce ideas off each other and get guidance. I think that was great.
I think one of the things that worked before was where there were issues like the new evaluation strategy policy, then the required food for peace indicators and how they were folded in with the F indicators and the Feed the Future indicators, and then some monitoring and evaluation requirements. There were some issues that were really fundamental for us for implementers to understand and to be able to say to you, what's the implication of these things for us? And for you to understand, okay, so maybe we need to refine this or change this, or. But there was a lot of participation around the evaluation policy, around those indicators, and around the issue of how Food for Peace was going to adapt the evaluation policy. That took a long time for Food for Peace to come down on that. And there was a lot of consultation around that.
Okay. Well, please, if there are documents, I mean, the two I'm aware of right now are the APS and then that informed consent document. But if there are other documents out there that you'd like to review as a group or come to consensus on, let me know. I mean, please, I may miss, I'm trying to, my toes are, what am I doing here? I'm getting my feet wet. I'm green around the ears regarding TOPS, not regarding development, but I may not be aware of everything I should be aware of. So please, if there's a document you think we should, or a policy that we should review as a group, let me know. And let's just stay in communication.
What's the status of the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting guidance and policy? Well,
now, okay, so TD, yeah, so the draft is policy right now. Have you all sent your comments in? According to Arif, even though that's still draft, it is what you should all be following.
Yes, we sent comments in December.
Okay. Well,
but excuse me, in the draft that I saw, there were two sections at the end that were still to be finished. Evaluation was one, and there was another one that said still to be. So, is that the policy that those things are still to be done? Just check.
I don't know. That's a good question, and I will check. Okay, so it sounds like there's an interest to go over. Now, when you say the new draft, TD, you mean the one that came out like last September, right?
Yeah, which we
commented the old new draft.
In December.
Okay.
We don't know what happened to that after the comments gone.
Okay. Well, I'll ask Arif. I didn't get a date on when that would be finalized. The last, which I shared with you through the task force, the last I heard was this is what you should be following, even though it's not a final draft. But yeah, let's table that for now. It's after 11, but let's definitely bring it up. I'll try to get some more information before we meet again, and then let's figure out what you want to do with that. I'm not really clear if you want to. Yeah, maybe TD, send me some type, discussion points, things that you would like to discuss, or any of you around that M&E guide. If you send me some discussion points, areas of concern, we can set an agenda to discuss them. So
Yes, we shall.
Okay, that'd be great. So again, thanks to all of you. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I really appreciate you showing up today.
Get back on those DFAPs.
Okay, and Marcel says BBS. Okay, all right, sounds good. Sounds like there's
Bye-bye.
plenty for us to talk about. Take care now.
Thank you. Bye.